अस्सलाम
आवाज आ वालेकुम सलाम यार लिफ्ट करा दें
जी जी
या आधे घंटे का बिल मैं अलग भेजूंगा
सर you are live now so you can start your
ठीक है जी
presentation. I'm so sorry.
ओके
Please welcome Badar Khushnood, co-founder of Fishy.com e-commerce platform.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम अकबर and everyone thank you so much for inviting
Welcome.
I'll be talking about the e-commerce policy, especially the progress on it and where do we stand today, and happy to take any questions around it. I'll just share my screen and I'll then um, I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can see it.
Just give me a second as I okay. As and thank you Akbar for the introduction. So as Akbar just told you, I run an e-commerce company called Fishery.com, which is an e-commerce platform. And with regards to that, I'm part of the e-commerce policy process as well. So I'll be sharing from that perspective. Um, I'm sure you guys have already talked about a lot of numbers today, but just to help you recall some of the interesting numbers in Pakistan, if you see, we already have about 80 to 90 million internet users in Pakistan as per PTA. And the challenge, however, from an e-commerce perspective is that the digital payments ecosystem is still evolving. It is not yet as evolved as the internet connectivity part is. So you can see we only have 1% of the population which possesses a credit card. Almost 15% of the people possess a debit card. And overall, only 20% of the population is banked. And this number is too low. So majority of our e-commerce transactions in Pakistan are happening on cash on delivery because of this challenge we have right now in Pakistan. But just thought I'll share these high-level numbers with you, which most of you probably. From an e-commerce perspective, we need to keep in mind that whenever different e-commerce business models, and we need to be cognizant of the respective e-commerce business model while devising a policy or so the current focus of the policy is mostly towards the B2C marketplaces, which are generally known as OMPs, online marketplaces in Pakistani tax legislation. And the other is the direct to consumer, which is DTC, where the brands have their own direct.com or .pk domain e-commerce platforms, and they're selling directly to their audiences. Generally, there is a hybrid model which is being followed. So these are the two major use cases which have been addressed in the policy and are being worked through. But B2B is which is evolving as we see Badar and other Tajir and other startups coming in. I think that will be needing some policy guidelines there as well in the near future. From a global perspective, if you see 15% of the world's total retail is now online as e-commerce. So that's a kind of a global benchmark, which is 15% of the total retail. That amounts to almost $4 trillion, which this is a pre-COVID estimate. So we believe that post-COVID, this would certainly be higher than the $4 trillion, but we haven't yet seen the actual numbers coming in from 2020. So I think it will take another few weeks or so that we can have the numbers. But these are ballpark figures which will give you a trend, but it is certainly a growing global trend everywhere across the globe. From a Pakistani perspective, the two associations, relevant associations, one being PASHA, which is Pakistan Software Houses Association, and the other being Chain Store Association of Pakistan. We did deep dive into State Bank's current numbers, especially the last 4 quarters, and then we did extrapolate them. So we estimate, keeping in view 10 to 15% cash on delivery in Pakistan, we estimate that the last 4 quarters e-commerce transaction value of Pakistan was US $2 billion, which is not small. So Pakistan is certainly growing as well. If you look at State Bank's previous reports, which are I've linked some of them at the bottom, you will see that according to State Bank, the growth in e-commerce is around 90% or plus year-on-year growth. So this is certainly a growing sector, and most of the public sector organizations are also looking at it and collecting data accordingly as well. However, in Pakistan, that 15%, which is the global average, in Pakistan, that average is less than 1%. So Pakistan's total e-commerce online, this $2 billion, is less than 1% of Pakistan's total retail economy. So hence, almost 99% of the rest of the retail businesses have to go online, still go online, and that's an opportunity for both SMEs, women entrepreneurs, youth, all businesses. So huge opportunity for Pakistani businesses to go online. Whatever we see today on e-commerce in Pakistan is still just less than 1% of total retail. So huge opportunity for SMEs to explore this new access to market opportunity. A third-party report by Statista and We Are Social, which came out later last year, shows that the growth in these categories like fashion, beauty, electronics, food, furniture, and appliances has been nearly 100% in Pakistan year on year. So I mean, even above 100%. So I think that we see that this is also being validated by the global data collecting companies as well, analytics companies as well. So this is validated by them as well, that Pakistan is seeing growth in e-commerce in the last few years. From a very high level perspective, there's always a question where how China grew its e-commerce so much. So one of the key factors, amongst many others, was the e-packet system by China. And that e-packet is a very cheap, economical $1 delivery, cross-border delivery from China to about 40 countries, 44 countries to be precise. And that created a kind of a unique selling point for Chinese production to be shipped out to the rest of the world at a very economical rate. So that was one of the reasons China grew rapidly in the e-commerce space, which is very evident in this graph. If you noticed in my previous slide, that China is leading the e-commerce space and not the US. So it is the East and not the West which is leading the e-commerce space. So hence, this is very well reflected because China have had its policies drafted properly and with a long-term vision way before others even thought about them. So there's a huge cross-border opportunity for Pakistani SMEs. This is just one example. This map you see on the right is drawn by the size of the countries in terms of their exports. If you notice the two circles I have put arrows on, one is a small one, which is actually Pakistan. The larger one is Singapore. However, in reality, Singapore is actually half of Lahore physically and even in population terms, which means almost 5 million people, half of Lahore space, and their exports is worth $373 billion versus Pakistan, where our exports are only $22 to $24 billion. So huge opportunity and huge deficiency in terms of per capita productivity. So I think there's an opportunity for SMEs to explore the cross-border e-commerce once they have kind of sharpened their skills within the domestic e-commerce space. There's certainly a huge demand in the global market, and that is also validated by research by Nielsen, which reflects that more than 50% of the people in developed countries, once they buy from their own country online, they are prone to buy cross-border from other countries. And I think that's an opportunity for Pakistani SMEs to explore. It's a huge opportunity which we should explore once we understand the e-commerce business models and have gone through it hands-on within the domestic market. From a policy perspective, keeping all of this in view, the government, the cabinet approved Pakistan's first ever e-commerce policy back in October of 2019 after a few years of deliberation, and the deliberation started in the Ministry of IT and then ended up in the Ministry of Commerce. And now, as per the rules of business, e-commerce is a jurisdiction of Ministry of Commerce. The policy overall has 9 pillars, but is based on 4 key themes, which is women, entrepreneurs, youth, startups, SMEs, and especially exports. So this was the main mantra of the whole policy, and these 9 pillars were created to address those key issues which most of these audiences face while performing their e-commerce activities. And there were two outcomes of the e-commerce policy once it was approved. One, as I mentioned earlier, that e-commerce became part of Ministry of Commerce as part of the business rules of business. Secondly, a new entity was created called National E-Commerce Council, and this e-commerce council represents Pakistan e-commerce industry to the Prime Minister every 6 months. So we have had our first meeting with the Prime Minister, and then we got COVID. So but we have been coordinating very, very closely with the advisor to Prime Minister, which is Razak Tausaf, and his team has been really, really cooperative in getting the policy converted into actual, real action items. But I've also shown some how this is structured in terms of there are almost 14 public and private and 14 private sector members to the council, and there are few fixed seats and few are on rotation. But it's a very active body which is working closely with public sector organizations to make sure that e-commerce is being facilitated as fast as possible. So here are some of the quick things which have events or milestones which have happened since the approval of the policy. So we have had our first stakeholders workshop after approval of the policy in October of 2019. We first met in January 2020. We then presented to the Prime Minister our first set of findings in January 2020. And one of the things which was initiated was the process for digital transformation of Pakistan Post was also initiated and discussed in that first meeting, since Pakistan Post is a critical element in terms of last mile delivery and possible collection points as well for SMEs and artisans. Another very important milestone which was achieved in that first policy implementation meeting was around freelancers remittance coming inside Pakistan. It is the inbound remittance. The limit was previously $5,000 to $10,000, was then increased to $25,000. And State Bank has been really, really cooperative in working on these improved regulations and policies. We have had a few meetings with SBR, but I think that is one area which really needs more focus and determination, and I think needs a lot more people to sit together and fix it. I think that's one of the biggest challenges right now we have. And then we have had another pillars meeting, which was on logistics. This was all happening just pre-COVID. We also shared some feedback on the citizens protection rules, which were introduced by PTA, and then they were kind of put on hold. And I think they're right now it's still in conversation. When it comes to, I think the most important, I would say, flagship achievement this policy document as a follow-up made was the B2C cross-border e-commerce regulation. So there is a new, it never existed actually. So there was only B2B regulation which existed. So you had to export a full container load and then get it registered through VBOC to get your e-form, and then eventually you were declared an exporter. Now you can actually ship one single unit of any product cross-border and through a courier company. You can actually go to DHL. You can tell them that this is my bank account number, this is my CNIC or NTN number, and this one single packet of item which I made myself, I'm shipping out of Pakistan, is actually an export and not a gift. And the remittance against that export will be considered actually legal remittance, and you should get all the benefits which an average exporter gets on in that category or that. So the B2C cross-border e-commerce is also getting progress on this, and this was one of our first things which we got approved and worked on. We also did share feedback with State Bank on the global digital service providers remittance. So a lot of companies have to pay to Amazons and the Microsofts and Facebooks and the Googles out of Pakistan. So we got those few large recipients of these remittances as whitelisted, so that the documentation process is eased out from an ease of doing business perspective for companies or individuals sending money to these companies. And then came in the first lockdown. And this policy and then the National E-Commerce Council was the first entity to get the SOPs approved by the Prime Ministers and then implemented by Punjab and Sindh government in terms of getting deliveries easily done, even during lockdown. We had to convince all the leadership that this is the best way forward to make sure that people stay at home and the deliveries can be made to them, whether it is food or other items and goods. So we got those SOPs approved, moved on and worked with, we are also working on a trial with Amazon so that Pakistani companies can directly work with Amazon from Pakistan. This is being led by Ministry of Commerce as well. We then had our second NECC during COVID peak season. This was held virtually with the advisor, and the progress was taken care of properly. And then since then, we have been deep diving into a specific pillar, which is pillar 2, which is digital payments and financial inclusion. We have recently submitted our consolidated findings and recommendations on how to fix the digital payment and financial inclusion issues which were raised by the e-commerce merchants. So we have to give a deep dive into 3 different areas there. One is the inbound freelancers payments. 2 is the card-based payments. 3rd is the account-based and international payment gateways issues as well, and also mobile wallets. So we did deep dive into all of them with all stakeholders, including public and private sector, to make sure that everyone is included properly and it's an inclusive feedback on action items on which things to be prioritized first. We are right now focusing heavily on deep diving into the taxation pillar so that we can share budgetary recommendations with the relevant authority for the upcoming 2021 budget. So that's how the policy action items have been really focused on specifically around e-commerce policy. And just to summarize all of this, from based on the experience we have gained so far by actually doing e-commerce, working with partners, and then also getting the policy part as well. I think Pakistan's GDP and exports can be truly multiplied, literally multiplied 2 to 5x easily if we really fix these things. The first and the foremost in terms of domestic e-commerce is the tax part. Then is the digital payments part. Cash is still cheaper to transact than digital payments. The fear of tax does not encourage people to go online and use digital payments. So we need to fix these 2 things as soon as possible. Then we need to have a digitized dispute resolution mechanism as well. I think that needs to be sorted out so that the B2C online marketplaces can flourish and the consumer is also protected properly in addition to the merchant side as well. For the cross-border part, I think we need to really work on our outbound delivery rates, whether through Park Post or third parties or however, but that needs to be improved drastically. The cost of shipping out of 1 kg or the first kg of shipment is really expensive right now in Pakistan. Then I think we need to also connect international payment gateways to Pakistani gateways. This is already in progress, by the way. So that has been facilitated very fast track by State Bank as well and the local financial institutions as well. And I think the other thing we need to do is enable our SMEs to do cross-border e-commerce. And that is through creating global hubs, doing the right partnerships, and facilitating in terms of policy so that they can manage their returns, cancellations, marketing expenses, promotions, all of those, because some of our legislation is still very old school and does not allow how much money can be used for international transactions and how an SME can actually do it. The ease of doing business part there is very complicated. So I think if we just need to fix these few things, and I think Pakistan can really leverage the e-commerce boom globally to help our domestic economy and also our growth of exports and bringing in and improving our balance of payments. Thank you so much, and I am available on all social networks. So feel free to connect with me later on, and happy to take any questions right now.
Thank you very much, Badar, for your beautiful presentation. Is there any question on the floor? No, we don't have any question right now. Let's wait for a minute if there's anyone who's asking any question. No, there's no question at the moment. Thank you, Badar, and we'll connect again, inshallah. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Bye. Allah Hafiz.